Before I play these reeds for you and give you the opportunity to hear the differences of sound, at least the differences of sound that come through me and my equipment, which are variables, I want to further explain to you variables in the sound in this video, as well as show you the differences in the reeds. Now, one of the variables is that I'm most used to playing the Vandoren Java 3.5s on my tenor sax, though I recently had my mouthpiece opened up. So they're not going to play the same as I'm used to, but again, it is the reed that I'm most used to using on the tenor sax. I was already inclined to play the softer 3.5s that came in the box, so even more now that my mouthpiece has been further opened up, I am very interested in playing the size 3s and seeing how I like those. On alto sax, I'm pretty experienced in playing the Fibracells. This is a Fibracell size 5. One of the things I like on the alto regarding the Fibracell is, in my experience, it gives me a wide dynamic of sound and use. For example, if you're used to playing a size 2.5 on a cane reed and then you jump and try a size 5 on a cane reed of the same cane reed, you're probably going to be in for a shock in finding out how much more air it takes. One of the things I like about Fibracell is a harder reed does allow me to push it harder, but it doesn't take a ton of air for me to get a sound out of it in the first place, so that gives me more room for expression. The other reed is the Legere, and this is a size 4. Now, when I bought it a while ago, I didn't realize how hard a size 4 Legere was. If you look at their sizing charts online, you'll see that a size 4 on a Legere, generally speaking, is going to be significantly harder than a size 4 on other reeds. Now, I haven't played this one much because my mouthpiece was already in need of repair to be even. And now that I've had it opened up, even though it is a hard reed, it plays better for me now. And of course, then all reeds will play better on a mouthpiece that has an even table and rails. So before I show you more about the mouthpiece, I want to show you more of the difference between these reeds. So here's the Java, and here is a Fibracell. You notice that they're very similar in cut style, but the Fibracell does go down further. And then here's the Legere, similar in style, a little different because it has that more square, straight line cut at the bottom, but very comparable here to the Java. Now, as I said in the beginning in a manner, one of the most important variables is just the person. Everybody's sense of expression is different, and in part that's related to what they find value in regarding sound. Our experience is different, our bodies are different, many variables regarding the person. So no matter what mouthpiece we're on, we're inclined often to try to go after a certain sound. Having said that, the mouthpiece is debatably one of the most important variables. Now, some mouthpieces play similar to each other, while honestly, you could really go to a different mouthpiece and it can give you an entirely different sound. But again, sometimes we're inclined to try to make the same sound get produced out of everything. So I want to show you a little bit about this mouthpiece, because if your mouthpiece is similar to you, it might give you a more accurate insight regarding how these sort of reeds may sound on your mouthpiece. So this used to be a 6-star, probably cannot see that, it used to be a 6-star Otto, and John Yoakum revised it, and he did a great job. He added a baffle, added in, it's a light baffle, and it is significantly opened up. So it's definitely not a 6-star anymore. And this Otto, I believe, is the same one that you can commonly buy today. It's the Super Tone Master U.S.A. So those, I believe, are the most important variables. But for those who are interested, I will share the other things briefly here. For the ligature, I have an Olegature ligature. For the microphone that I'll be playing into, it's the Rode NTK. And what I'm going to be doing, because I'm planning to make other videos too, it might sound more complicated than it has to be, but for those who want to know, here's the information. So I'm going to be going into a tiny soundboard from, so the Rode NTK, actually, how this works is it has its own power box that, this is a unique cord on top of it, goes into there, and then I'm going to take a Megami gold cable out of there into this tiny soundboard, and this is a Soundcraft notepad. I'm going to go into that. I'm going to try to keep that very minimal in variables, just very plain. And I'm going to go into an effects board. And the reason is because I'm going to give you the opportunity to hear these reeds with and without effects. I'm using the Lexicon MX series. Now within the MX series, there's, as well as other Lexicon, what are they called? Sound processors or effects processors. There's all kinds of options you get to explore. But they include a bypass button. So I'm going to go into that and I'm going to push the bypass button so you don't hear the effects, and then I can push the turn it off so you can hear it with effects. From there, I'm going to go into this bigger soundboard. This is the Yamaha MG16XU, and I'm going to keep it very plain as possible again. Now, one of the reasons I'm sharing this is because some people are aware that there's a slight variance in sound with interfaces and mixing boards with their preamps. So I'm going to come out of that and I'm going to go into an iRig of some sort and into this iPhone. As I'm working on making these videos, I went back to listen when I paused, and I realized that when I was talking that none of it was getting picked up because I'd adjusted the volume to not distort in response to the loudness of the tenor saxophone. So I want to share some things with you before you move forward and hear more of the videos that I have worked on and will work on. So those first videos, just based on the simple pentatonic C scale notes, but more based on the A minor, I started with that Fibracell, which is playing pretty soft. And then I played the harder Java. Now what's interesting is, even just when I started to listen back, through the recording, the sound is not as drastic as of a difference as it is to the natural ear, and that's because it is not natural, of course, this whole recording process. But also, what we hear, just in relation to the reverberation against our jaw and then our location of our ears in response to the saxophone, it's a sobering reminder to me that what we hear is different than what other people hear. So there's times where I'll play and ask people how stuff sounds to them, because ultimately the goal for most musicians is for it to sound pleasing to the listener. So just some thoughts in response to these reeds that I've already been working on. One is that in order to get some of these harder playing reeds to really play, I had to blow them harder. And so you'll notice in those videos how the harder Java reed, that I had a little bit more of a hairy sound, as my wife likes to call it, or the overblown sound. And actually with my Java cane reeds, I noticed that I accomplished that more than with the Fibracells, because the Fibracells are pretty easy blowing. So I can get an overblown sound, but I notice, again, if you heard, I said in the beginning that I play it more often with the alto. So there's been times where I'll be playing that with a group, and if I don't hear myself as clearly as I want to hear, I'll be blowing harder. And though it's a very loud horn combination, when it comes to a big arena and sound system, that concept is kind of thrown out the window. So it really is driven by what's coming into the sound system. So all that to say, there's times where I push it harder, and then I still can get that distorted, that overblown sound out of a Fibracell. But here it's more easily accomplished, and some people don't want that and some people do want that. It's more easily accomplished in my experience with this combination with the cane reeds, and then even with that Legere reed. I had to push it pretty hard to get the sound out, and that relates to what I was saying, the difference between Fibracell and other synthetic reeds in my experience is. But also, because I have to push pretty hard just to get the tone out of the Legere reed, it's harder for me to get that range of dynamic. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's that learning curve with it. Now, if I'm doing something very intentional, I can do it, but when it comes to those spontaneous inflections in a more fast sequence, I'm having a harder time with that, where even to the point where the note may not even speak out clearly because I'm so used to using that sense of use of my air with other reeds. Now, with the Legere, something else that I just want to make note of is I have to be more intentional. Again, it's because it's such a hard reed. It's not going to be true for all of them, but with this kind of Legere reed and how hard it is, with my setup, I found that where I place it and the height really does make a big difference. Now, if you've ever had trouble playing your reed, if it's too hard, it's not a solve-all. It can actually be counterproductive because less of it might be vibrating, but you can try to lower your reed on your mouthpiece just a little bit. Now for me, because of the way I like reeds to play, oftentimes I find myself actually raising the reed a little bit on the mouthpiece. So for this Legere reed, I'm finding that it might sound silly, and this is part of the reason I didn't play it so much in the past, is to my ear, now it doesn't sound the same when I just briefly listen back. I don't hear it as much, but to my ear, when I played this in the past, and even now, depending on the placement, it almost sounded like my saxophone was sucking in helium. Have you ever done that where you suck in helium and the voice starts to sound funny like that? It kind of reminds me of that, and that's cool for some people, but generally speaking, the sound that I go for on tenor, it doesn't work as well with that. So moving forward, you're about to hear more videos that I've already made, and what I'm doing on those is I am playing from middle G and I'm just rolling down on the C scale to a low C, and then I'm working my way back up, and then I do a little doodaddy with an altissimo G. Sometimes it's better on pitch than others. And one of the things I realized in doing that, because I haven't played my tenor sax much lately, is that my low C didn't always speak out clearly. Now sometimes it does relate to the saxophone, and on this tenor saxophone, I've had it for a couple decades. I've never took it in to get fixed. That's my own issue, but I've never had it looked at. So there's some pad leaks going on, but it also really does come down to the player. And so we naturally start to adjust our embouchure. So what started happening even in these videos is, again, because I haven't played it much lately, that when I try to play it more quietly, initially I had more trouble getting that low C, which should not be that hard to get it to speak, but I had more trouble. Again, I'm new with these reeds, but my embouchure, in my experience, with my embouchure, my experience, I did naturally start to adjust to make it happen with, again, the use of my airflow and my embouchure. So these are all things to keep in mind too. Again, really the main message, I guess, in what I'm sharing here is, if you play a reed and you like the sound, I think it's worth fighting for. And one of the reasons I transitioned on the alto to Fibracell is because I like the playability so much. I actually fought for getting it to sound more like the sound I was used to accomplishing. And of course that's not going to ever fully happen, so you kind of weigh out your benefits and you move forward from there. The other thing I do in these videos that you're about to listen to here, where I'm rolling down to that low C, the first time I go more for an aggressive approach, and so I go down to that low C, then I go up to the altissimo G, and then the next time through, I try to take it, just to clarify, because I don't think I made it clear before, I take a softer approach to it. I don't try to blast it and have such of an aggressive sound, though in some cases it might sound very similar just because I'm trying to get a good sound out of the reed in the first place. So the way I do altissimo, you notice how there's a delay in that? Now I can tongue it differently to make sure I get it. And that was flat. There, I just was more conscious of it, doing the way I like to do it on the Java to get the tone out. But the reed does respond differently. Again, you learn how to work with your reed. Now here's more chill. A little too little bit, I had to blow more air to get the tone out. Now with the effects. There's that issue again. I just need to get more air support and adjust my embouchure. Now with the effects. It actually seems to be playing harder for me now than it did before, so it's probably related to that reed placement. So I'm going to take it down just a hair. And if you don't know that, by not doing it too much because that can be counterproductive too, but by slightly lowering your reed, it might help you play it better. For this next portion, it's going to sound a little silly, but I'm going to do two drastically different things, and I'm not going to use the reverb. I'm just going to do a very sharp da 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 da. I'm not sure if I used the right notes, but G, 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 A, eventually, with the octave key, to exemplify if you can get that kind of sound with this kind of combination. And then I'm going to try to do something along the lines of to show a dynamic of going from a very present, clear sound to trying to accomplish more of a subtone sort of sound. Now, having just done those videos there, you might have noticed that the Legere, surprisingly, I was able to, and I'm not saying it'd be the same for everybody, but based on the way I use my embouchure and I'm used to being able to adjust my embouchure to accomplish certain things, I was surprised that I was able to get this subtonish kind of sound more easily on the Legere. Now, with a very hard cane reed, I almost have to be careful not to get a subtone sort of sound. So when I use that softer Java 3.5, I had to work a little harder with my embouchure to try to get that kind of sound going on. Now, the other thing though, and it's a common concern with synthetic reeds, is that people don't think that you can get that authentic subtone sound. It really just relates to what you think sounds good, but they don't think you can really get that out of a synthetic reed. This last series of videos is going to be me playing each reed to a portion of Amazing Grace, this time with reverb. Now, I actually went to do it already, and I went to listen back and realized that I forgot to turn on the reverb for the Fibracell, so I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and share some thoughts in response to the Fibracell and to the Javas. So, as I mentioned before, I'm used to playing the Fibracell on alto, and again, every mouthpiece reed combination has different implications of how it's going to play for you and how it's going to sound. On my alto, I feel that I'm far more comfortable and able to get certain inflections of sound as opposed to with this. And a big part of it is just, I believe, how the beak part here of the mouthpiece relates with the reed. So when you listen to me play the Javas, you're probably going to notice a greater dynamic of expression between those two, with those two, as opposed to with both synthetic reeds. I think as far as that aspect of expression goes, it's probably hardest with the Legere, and then a little easier here with the Fibracell. But my point is that it's not Fibracell's fault. It relates with the mouthpiece reed combination, and also as well, like I said, with alto, I've been doing it for a while, so there's also that dynamic of just learning to adjust. Another note, just to say while I'm here too, is between the hard Java and the softer Java, and it's an old softer Java, I would love to have a reed that's right in the middle, and this harder Java is well on its way to be like the softer reed probably used to be. You'll probably hear where there's more of that breathiness, not necessarily on purpose, on the harder Java, but also a little bit more room for inflection by way of the reed being harder. Not every hard reed works that way, but I do like that in this case it gives me more room, and that's more room for inflection, and that's one of the reasons I do like harder reeds, because they often do give me more room for a dynamic of expression between notes. Also, if you hear a basketball, if you hear a washer and dryer, somewhere in the video, that's what's going on. So now I'm going to move forward and show you these videos of me playing Amazing Grace, and each video is going to gradually add more and more from the song. Before I play my last bit and end this video, just want to make another note about the Legere reed and my experience with this. Again, it's the strength of it relating with the type of mouthpiece this is. But when it comes to articulating and having a more open sound when I go to articulate it, more playability when I go to articulate it, there would be a major learning curve for me on this one. Yet there's still something very interesting about the sound that I can get out of this Legere reed. So I just want to share that with you before I close out with Amazing Grace on this Legere size 4.